Well, welcome to KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM. From now until 8 o'clock, you are listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor. And as usual, from 7:30 until 8 o'clock, callers are invited to call in with questions about this month's continuing topic of endocrinology. We're wrapping up the parathyroid gland physiology and bone health and bringing out lots of different medicinal herbs that have PubMed research, NIH, documentation supporting evidence and efficacy. So as much as we don't ever like to say that the internet is a reliable source of information, because there's lots of information out there that's not reliable, much of the anecdotal evidence for the use supporting traditional medicinal herbs for various conditions have had generational evidence, both culturally and now appropriately and scientifically validated. So it's possible, we can find good information on the internet. We can also find bad information. And so you have to dig through the sources to find the truth. So you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM, and on the web at www.kmud.org. We're also live streaming this program to our Western Botanical Medicine YouTube channel, so you can listen live right now on our channel by searching Western Botanical Medicine in the search bar on YouTube and then clicking on the live stream. So tonight's radio show is a part 5 continuation of the endocrine hormone system and the herbal and alternative medicines that can modulate it. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Welcome.
We're both licensed medical herbalists who consult with clients with a wide range of condition. Our website is www.westernbotanicalmedicine.com, and you can visit our site to see a list of our organic medicinal herb tinctures, and our contact details are there also. Alternatively, we can be reached on our toll-free number 1-888-WBM-HERB. Our Western Botanical Medicine Twitter's account is at WBM-HERB, and our YouTube channel, as I said, is Western Botanical Medicine. So links to both our Twitter and YouTube channel are also on our website at westernbotanicalmedicine.com. So to wrap up, last month we went through the composition of bone. We went through the major terminology for anybody who's done any physiology or done any kind of background medical training experience. Osteoblastic activity is referred to the cells that build bone. Osteoclastic activity is another set of cells which are intimately related to bone breakdown and resorption. So let's not forget that bone is just not, it's not dead. It's a very dynamic and living tissue, constantly being checked, constantly being asked for. In terms of when we exercise it, we're asking the bone to put up with the stresses placed on it. It's a calcium store amongst many other minerals that it stores, that it will release calcium into the bloodstream in times of shortage, and vice versa. When calcium is in the diet, calcium is sequestered into the bone along with other matrices like collagen, etc., that build up this architectural framework, which essentially is a building, if you like, composed of many different joints and facets that lock together and are elastic. It's not a rigid, strict substance. It's very elastic and very flexible. And this is all relative, of course, but that it was able to withstand shock and withstand all the tension and stresses that are put on it. Now, obviously, with increasing age has its own negative effects, and that typically, amongst other things, are the buildup of waste products, the general decreasing health and metabolic activity of the person, and lots of things predispose to a gradual weakening, not just of the bones, but of the immune system, of the the brain, just in terms of cognition and remembering details and facts. All of these things kind of slowly but surely over time, unless you're paying attention to it and being mindful, that the organism declines with age. It's just part and parcel of what we expect, but it doesn't have to be like that. I think Dr. Pete was probably one of the most profound characters that we've ever met and talked with. And we really enjoyed having him on the show here for those 12 plus years that he joined us. His brain was extremely agile, and even when he passed at 86, he was still very much on top of his game. So it doesn't have to be the way that the world would tell you, that when you get older, you just get old and things ache and you just get more and more decrepit and you die. It doesn't have to be like that. Obviously, in the world that we live in, we're exposed to many things, and unfortunately, through greed and through money and corporations, power, and etc., things are produced that never should be brought to market. Plasticizers are one of those things, and so we've done plenty of shows about the estrogenic mimic effect of plasticizers, how they completely disrupt the endocrine system. And so past 5 months, with this May being the 5th part of our discussion of endocrinology, I just want people to recognize just how profoundly affected our body and our physiology is at extremely low concentrations of product. So when we talk about estrogen and progesterone, we're talking about 10 to the -9 and 10 to the -12 concentrations of substances that have profound effects physiologically on the organism. So I think we'll just continue where we left off last month. And like I said, we were talking about osteoblastic, which is the building cells, and osteoclastic, which are the absorbing cells, and their modulation, and how bone is a constantly renewed and remodeled substance, and that microfractures which occur, I won't say normally, but microfractures that do occur through strenuous activity or from falling or from bad positional, skeletal kind of positions. These things, they just spontaneously occur. Now, whether they would or not in a totally healthy person, if you consider some athlete who's, eating a really good diet and is paying attention to avoiding noxious chemicals and toxins in the diet and has a very clean life, and the thyroid's working well, and they eat and drink lots of milk, and they've got a calcium-rich diet, and they get vitamin D and magnesium, and their thyroid's working well, and their skeleton is strong. You think of an Olympian, they probably don't get microfractures on a regular basis. But I think for most people that are just coping with being human, I think microfractures are probably more common than we think. And so the bone is able to repair these microfractures and does this as part and parcel of its job, as well as shuttling nutrients backwards and forwards from the bone into the blood supply and back again. So, as I said, last month, we kind of wrapped up the whole bone building, bone resorbing system, and how that works, and how the parathyroid is intimately involved with that. So there are drugs that obviously have profound effects on the bone that many people might not even know about. So let's just discuss some of those. Things like serotonin receptor inhibitors are definitely implicated in osteoporosis. So the massive use of SSRIs in the last 30 years or so, driven by the drug industry and driven by over-diagnosis of quote-unquote psychological disturbance and depression, being part and parcel, I think, of our just exposure to all the stresses in life in this day and age, that SSRIs, these selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, have been massively prescribed. They're definitely implicated in osteoporosis. Glucocorticoids, another substance I think that's pretty much handed out like candy for most people that are quote unquote using steroids as inhalants for asthma or eczema, both of which conditions have been increasingly more common over time, because I believe our exposure to the wider environmental pollution and toxic residues that most people don't even think about. Both these conditions, asthma and eczema, and atopy in general, I think has skyrocketed in the last 30 or 40 years.
And also because of the use of central air heating systems that can that they have linked the rise in asthma and allergies in children to the rise in central heating forced air systems.
Now, amongst all the other drugs, when I was looking for drugs that are known osteoporosis contributors, androgen deprivation therapy. So I think in females that have perhaps polycystic ovarian syndrome or other hormonal imbalances where there are more androgens typically than would be normal, and therapy is initiated to block these androgens in favor of I won't say the good, but the estrogenic activity in a woman, as opposed to the testosteronogenic activity that can be manifested in some women with PCOS. But these drugs themselves cause osteoporosis. And then proton pump inhibitors. I mean, how common are they? For people with acidity, hyperacidity, people that complain of reflux, people that have stomach ulcers because it's caused by the stress they're under, get prescribed proton pump inhibitors. Now, these are totally responsible for the increasing rise in osteoporosis. And then there's a compound, a thiazolidine-dione. And now this is actually given to people for glucose control. Okay, it's an insulin sensitizer that acts on intracellular metabolic pathways to enhance insulin's action and increasing insulin sensitivity in critical tissues. I wonder how much that is. I mean, I know diabetes is on the rise. It seems like most disease that we hear about, and if you watch TV, which I don't, but I know the adverts, I see them every now and again if you get on a plane or you're on some other space where there's a TV going. They're punctuated by drug adverts, and the drug adverts, obviously, they're promoting the use of their drug with all the rapidly mentioned side effects, etc. I think they have to by law. But these things are certainly very common, and I'd love to get the numbers of prescribed medication and actually have a kind of per person number of how much is prescribed in terms of the general population per person. Then other chemotherapies. I mean, obviously, as a result of treatment for cancer, methotrexate is completely associated with osteoporosis as a long-term negative effect. I mean, it's not just a negative effect of the chemo, which we've done plenty of shows about cancer and chemotherapy and all of the associated horrific side effects. And unfortunately, these things, as I mentioned, all these other prior drugs are all osteoporosis forming.
And methotrexate is not just a drug that's used as a chemotherapy agent. It's also used chronically for rheumatoid arthritis and other inflammatory conditions and autoimmune conditions. So, you can say, well, if it's just chemotherapy, that's fine. You won't take it forever. But when you're dealing with conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, it is a long-term treatment. You keep taking it.
Right. Okay, so let me just let people know you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMD Gabble, 91.1 FM from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. You're invited to call in with any questions either related to or unrelated to this month's continuing topic of bone health. The number is 707-923-3911. Get on to some of these. What are you saying? Engineers pointing at me. What's going on?
Well, no, you hit the talkback button, so some people missed a little bit, but I think they got it. 923-3911.
Yeah,
now is the time to call.
Yeah, 707-923-3911.
And could I ask a question for someone who might be listening
Absolutely.
in the audience? Was just diagnosed with, I think it was calcification of the tendons at the top of the shoulder. Could you talk about that? And had been taking a lot of calcium for the last several years. Could you take too much calcium, and could that be related, or what do you know? Hypercalcification, I think, is what they called it.
So a lot of times when you have an injury in your joints, you can get this hypercalcification as the body's healing process is trying to repair. But usually what happens is when people have high blood calcium, and I did explain some of this at the last show, when you have a high blood calcium, your body can tend to deposit it in places where it shouldn't, like your arteries. So it can contribute to coronary artery disease, and also in your joints. And usually that's because people are vitamin D and calcium deficient. So if someone's taking and supplementing with a lot of calcium and or vitamin D, and they have they have high blood calcium levels, then I would want to be looking at what their parathyroid hormone level is at. And also, are they dissolving their bone for other reasons? Because the body is very good at keeping a tight parameter on these levels in the blood. And if it goes outside of the normal, then there's compensating mechanisms and processes that happen. So that would be the first thing I'd say is, what's your blood calcium level? I like it to be between 9 and 9.5. Once it starts getting up to 9.7 or 10 or 10.2, then I recommend people start supplementing with calcium. And if that doesn't bring it down, I change the calcium supplement, or I recommend they use dairy or other herb teas to get their calcium, because sometimes these calcium supplements you don't absorb very well. And it's always important to take a calcium supplement with a full meal. If you take it on an empty stomach, you will absorb very little calcium. And like Andrew was saying, if you're on a proton pump inhibitor, you're going to be inhibiting your acid in your stomach. If you're taking calcium supplements or you're getting calcium in your diet, you won't have as much stomach acid to digest and dissolve and absorb the calcium, so you'll become calcium deficient. So there's lots of different factors, but that's the first thing I'd recommend. Get the blood level tested.
Okay, so do we have we have a caller on the air, so let's take this caller. Caller, you're on the air. Where are you from, and what's your question?
Hello.
Hi, you're on the air. What's your question, and where are you from?
Hi, Andrew. I am from Maryland, United States, and I have a very unusual question, and I hope that you can come up with something that's going to help me. So I have this upper gum pain after a tooth extraction that has been persistent for a year, and it's just not going. It radiates up sometimes to my jaw, my temp. I've done all the ultrasound. Everything looks clear, but I still have this gum pain and cheek pain, which is so chronic, and I'm living with it every day. So, what could it be, and why is it just not going? The doctor's trying to give me corticosteroids, which I'm refusing, which I have not taken. So, I just am a little clueless here. If you can think of something, that would be great.
Hi, I was wondering, ma'am, is there a visible or palpable? Can you feel an abscess on
I
your?
don't feel nothing over there. It's just gum. And if I press the area with my finger, it doesn't even hurt. But it's like, imagine somebody's arm has been amputated, but the pain is still there.
Right. Okay. So have you had any recent tooth extractions or root canals or crowns or any dental work done like a year
it was
ago
1
before?
year ago that I got my tooth extracted, and after that the pain has just not gone. It still seems like the tooth has been extracted like yesterday, and I still have that stabbing pain in my gum.
Right. So it's like a phantom pain. Like a phantom.
It's phantom pain, correct?
Yeah, phantom pain. And has the dentist done any type of scans, ultrasounds, MRIs, or other scans?
They did. Well, I went to a neurologist. Dentist didn't know what it was. He pushed me to a neurologist, and I went and I did. He said it could be giant cell arteritis, but then I did a scan for that. They said no, everything looks clear. Then they said try Botox. Well, I did that. Nothing helps with that. I still have that annoying pain, and it's just it's stressful to have that pain.
I'm wondering if there's just a little bit of the nerve
Yeah.
is still there. I mean, you would think that
It's got to be nerve
it-
related.
it would stop after a while. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe rubbing some St. John's wort oil on the gum line would really
Okay.
help to calm that
Mhm.
nerve down, because really you want to quieten that nerve that's
Yes.
that's still firing.
Have you ever tried
Correct.
have you tried aspirin or anti-inflammatory? Not, you know.
You know what helps me is clonazepam, but I don't want to be on it forever.
Yeah.
The clonazepam really helps me take down and the muscle pain or whatever the
Mhm.
pain, the nerve pain.
Yeah.
Nothing else helps. Any other anti-inflammatory doesn't help. I've tried rubbing the St. John's wort oil on my cheek topically,
Mhm.
but
On the
like
gum.
Sarah said, I'm gonna try that doing on the gum.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's specific for neuralgia. So what you're describing most definitely is not just soft tissue inflammation. If you've had it for a year, it sounds to me like some kind of nerve damage that is lasting and residual as a result of the extraction.
Yeah.
Now, presumably, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I presume that they removed all of the root when you had the extraction? I mean, they've removed the whole
took
tooth. So
everything out and
yeah.
Well, there is
And I wonder if
this
there's any other
thing.
nerve has been damaged as part of the extraction, whether or not any of the
what
associated.
do I do? Go back to the dentist?
No, I don't. I think once the tooth is extracted, if they've damaged some of the nerve through the
Adjacent tooth.
extraction, and or there's some ligament of the tooth root left in the jaw.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I mean, what was the other scan? Because supposedly my dentist said that my naturopathic dentist, or he's called a holistic dentist, he told me that they can only see if there's remaining or a cavitation in an or abscess after an extraction if you have a CAT scan, which I definitely don't recommend a CAT scan for that.
Right.
But
Yes.
because that's a
Yeah.
CAT scan of your head, and that's just
Yes.
it's really a lot of radiation for
Correct. I don't want to do that.
the risk versus benefit. But supposedly you can only see these cavitations that could develop post extraction, tooth extraction, with the CAT scan. And what he does is he goes in and cleans out any residual organic matter, that organic
Yeah.
ligament of the tooth and or decay that could be there. And that's how he treats it. But I'm wondering if there's something more you can do just to treat the nerve that's much less invasive than that.
Is it the upper jaw or lower jaw?
It's the upper jaw.
Yeah,
It's
that would
the
be
upper
more.
jaw right
That's
at the
probably
end.
more problematic for sinus-associated perforation.
Yeah.
If during the extraction the bony plate above it was perforated in any way, then do you have any associated nasal congestion or any?
No. I actually have nothing. Thankfully, I have no nasal congestion,
Mhm.
no water coming out of my nose, no allergies, nothing. I've tried rubbing a ton of Project E. I've done
Right.
so many things, and what helps me is eugenol, clove oil. It helps
Yeah,
me, but it's
yeah.
very temporary,
Sure.
and then after some time it comes back again. Now my question is again, like, I'm so scared, like, is it lifelong? Is it going to subside? Is it going to go, or am I going to be living with this?
Well,
Yeah,
nerves, they can heal them. Nerves can heal and or
Yeah.
retreat. They retreat, like when you have nerve pain in your tooth, it can get better and the nerves retreat back into the body away from the tooth. But it sounds more
And
like
the
it's
doctor has given me like a Medrol for 1 week, and it's just lying in my drawer. I don't know whether to take it or to not take it. The corticosteroid, she's saying, could be inflammation, so do it for a week.
Well, I've never been a fan of corticosteroids.
Yes, neither am I. That's why it's just sitting in my drawer, and I don't care about that.
Have you tried using aspirin as an anti-inflammatory?
Aspirin, I'm very afraid because I don't know. I took aspirin. I started some tingling in my ears, so I'm afraid of aspirin.
Yeah, you can get transient ear ringing with doses of aspirin, but usually that's not till you get to about 2 or 3 grams a day.
Yeah. So do you think I should?
Aspirin, if you take more than 100 milligrams of aspirin a day, which is like a baby aspirin, then it is recommended that you supplement with vitamin K2 as well to prevent the blood thinning effect.
so the St. John's wort oil, I'm gonna give that a go. And if anything else comes to your mind, quickly, you can let me know.
Well, the other thing is you can rub the St. John's wort not only on the gum and
Mhm.
around the area where the tooth was extracted, but also on, like you said, it goes up to your temples. I think you mentioned the pain can go up
Yes,
to. So
it goes
also
up to-
rub
yeah,
there because you're feeling the pain there because the nerve is firing there. So you can treat
it is.
it topically. And by St. John's wort oil, do you have like a red oil?
Yeah, it's a red oil that I ordered from Herb Farm.
Good.
Okay,
And
good. So yeah, that's a good oil to rub on there. If as
Yeah.
long as it's red,
yes,
it has
Yeah.
the hypericin in there. Okay, great. Well, give that a try topically and inside your mouth, and
Let us
Yes.
know.
then keep in touch.
I will, and I have to, before I hang up, I have to let you know that how much I love you guys dearly.
Thank you.
I've been listening to you since Dr. Pete was around, and I just adored him, and I've learned so much from you, and it's like music to my ears to hear both of you. And I put on your podcast at night, and that's how I sleep and learn
Good
and
for you.
absorb. And
All right.
I mean, I just love you.
Oh, thank you so much.
We appreciate that, and we do it
Yeah.
because of people like you who, from time to time, we get to hear about the effects have rippled out across the ether to people like you. So,
Well, we
thanks for your
feel
call.
so blessed to have learned so much from Dr. Pete. So
Yes,
we want to
he's
pass
a-
it on.
Yes, and he's always going to be in my heart.
Yes,
always.
same here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Yep.
Sarah, and thank you, Andrew. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for your call.
Okay, we have another caller on the air. Let's take this next caller. Call away from. What's your question? The caller was there. The caller is there.
Whoops, my bad. Caller, try again.
Okay.
Can I be heard now?
Yes, you can. That was operator error.
Okay. Yeah, you're on the air. Caller, where are you from? What's your question?
I have a comment, and my comment is along your same lines of recommendation for the previous caller, homeopathic hypericum. I've had incredibly enormous amounts of help in my history using hypericum homeopathically. And I'm thinking that it would be well worth a try.
Yes, definitely.
There you go. I mean, it is a specific for neuralgia. So for me, it sounded like that person's problem was down to neuralgia as a result of that extraction. So yeah, they should, I'm sure they're listening. So Boiron is probably one of the most well-known worldwide manufacturers of homeopathics, European. So you can get a European Boiron product and a homeopathic.
Or which brand have
extract.
you used that you found great help with?
I use Hahnemann Labs primarily, but Delisos is also a good one over the counter. But at any rate, there's any number of manufacturers who do good work.
Yeah.
But Hahnemann is in San Rafael, and I don't have their number in front of me. I think it would take a professional to buy from Hahnemann, but Delisos is generally in health food stores over the counter, and seems to be good enough.
Okay. All
Great.
right. Well, thank
They
you
usually
for
have
your call.
30C or 200C potencies available,
Okay.
and I would probably get them both and start with a 30C and take a dose. This is a chronic situation now for her, but she could start experimenting with, and I'm sure there'd be a pamphlet or something in her health food store that would give some indications about how to use the remedy. But in general, if she's, I don't want to give professional advice over the phone,
No
but,
problem.
but
All
that's
right.
a good place to start, I would say.
Thank you.
I appreciate your call. I think there may have been another call coming in. So do we have another call?
No,
Anthony?
I just dropped him. Caller, call back.
Okay.
I just dropped you. So
okay, let's
sorry.
just put it out there. You're listening to Ask Your Herb, Dr. Kami D. Garbo, 91.1 FM from now until 8 o'clock. You're invited to call in with any questions related or unrelated to this month's continuing endocrine discussion of parathyroid health and bone health. We're going to focus on the herbs coming up here. The number, if you want to call in, is 707-923-3911. And the phone's ringing. Okay, caller, you're on the air. Where are you from? What's your question?
I'm here in Humboldt, and my question is, you guys were talking about, taking methotrexate or whatever,
Methotrexate.
and having basically that affecting your calcium levels. And so I know someone with rheumatoid arthritis who's, I think, maybe taking that. And so I was going to ask what you recommended. That someone in that situation, what they should be doing.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the risk-benefit analysis of anything, I would definitely approach rheumatoid arthritis in a different way than methotrexate, for sure. Obviously, as a holistic herbalist, we are intimately aware of foods and herbs, foods of which aggravate rheumatoid arthritis and promote and provoke inflammatory responses, as well as herbs that are anti-inflammatory, and obviously supplemental things like aspirins, which are anti-inflammatory, no doubt about it. So in terms of what I would recommend, it's kind of a drawn out question as a consultation question, but there's lots of herb anti-inflammatories, many of which would be able to mitigate the inflammation associated with rheumatoid arthritis. But with rheumatoid, especially predominantly affecting women, the estrogen component of women's physiology drives the inflammation, and that's what I wanted to get out in tonight's show. And we have mentioned it many times with Dr. Pete, how inflammatory estrogen is, and how the mainstream media and the internet and all the articles that you'll find will be promoting estrogen as if it's a bone-friendly compound. And it's absolutely the opposite. Dr. Pete spent, I don't know how much of his life, 40 years of his life, campaigning against the estrogen industry and pointing out the facts and the science behind progesterone's anti-inflammatory activity. I think even in herbal medicine, when we were studying herbal medicine, doing our degree 25 years ago, estrogen was, because we had regular mainstream medical physiologists, mainstream medical biochemists, mainstream medical doctors teaching in the training clinics and teaching in the environment in which we were learning, giving lectures on this and that. And they were all repeating the same thing. So it's even commonly associated in holistic circles that the same lie persists, that estrogen is the issue, that when women go into menopause, they need more estrogen, and that's why their bones are crumbling. It's absolutely not true. It's completely the opposite. And Dr. Pete went in great length, and many of our radio shows, if you look on our website, there's plenty of shows that we did on inflammation and estrogen being a promoter and an antagonist of inflammation, or agonist rather, is promoting it. So that's very real. And the effects of progesterone being antagonist to estrogen are what really should be repeated and encouraged, and people should be encouraged to recognize estrogen for what it is, which is basically an inflammatory mediator and a driver of cancers. So it's not the fact that when women go into menopause that they need estrogen and that's why their bones are crumbling. It's actually that their body doesn't stop promoting the secretion of estrogen. Every tissue in your body will continue to promote and provoke estrogen secretion, especially in response to inflammation. And as people get older and they get weaker and they get less healthy, inflammation rises in the body and stimulates the cells to secrete estrogen, which promotes the inflammation. It just goes around the vicious circle. I had one more comment or question, and it had to do with, I recently discovered, I was introduced to CBD syrup. I think it's basically like a raw, non-carboxylated form, like a cold pressed kind of cannabis concentrated oil or something. And
basically, it basically taught me something about herbal medicine, in that I could definitely feel it working for me, but it's a very subtle type of thing, and more or less I realized how much it helped me after basically just a few days of taking it. My chronic arthritis in my hip just totally disappeared, and I mean, it's been bothering me. You know, had kind of a chronic condition for a long time, and it was just shocking coincidence, if you could call it that. And I don't believe that it's a coincidence that basically within a week of kind of playing with the dosages a little bit and taking it sort of regular, that all of a sudden that my pain went away, and and not only that, but I could feel it energize my body and stuff. So anyways, I'm sure that's true probably of other herbs as well. It just really woke me up to the idea of like, okay, herbal medicine is somewhat more subtle perhaps, right?
Well, it's very real, and in fact, most of our modern drugs have the origins in herbal medicine. That's where it's all come from in the first place. But unfortunately, it gets usurped and is not in a. I mean, let's not be kind of wishy-washy about it in terms of the holistic origins of this. You know, plant medicines are very complex, and they're not isolated ingredients. That's the whole reason they are so gentle, is that they are not isolated extracts of a certain chemical, of which they have said in tests and studies do a certain thing and have a physiological activity that they're looking for. They're very well balanced, and so therefore you can use herbs which may have an ingredient that may in its own extracted isolated form cause heartburn, but which actually has an opposite effect as a balanced plant, because of the other components that come with it. So nothing should be isolated. And the whole CBD thing, I don't know, we should definitely move on to the discussion of bone health this evening. But
Okay.
we should probably do a talk about CBD in terms of its relation to THC and THC's obvious estrogenic activity, because it's in the same family as hops, and they both very well known estrogen promoters. So let's take. I think we should get on with the next call.
Yes,
and
I'll listen off there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate your call.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so we have another caller on the air. So let's take this next caller. Caller, where are you from?
Harvey from Berkeley.
You're calling from?
Berkeley.
Berkeley. Hi, what's your question?
Well, it's more of a comment, and then I'd like your feedback on it. Appreciate your feedback. And it's kind of about a healing that I practice myself. Say I bang my knee or something like that, or I have a headache or neck, or everything's tight or something. What I'll do is when I go to sleep, I'll verbally address my body with the concept of like when you tap into a computer, when you type in all your commands, it sort of carries it out. So I think the body is like that. And what I say to my body is, tonight I want you to override your normal procedure of cleaning up the body and rebuilding the cells, and focus your healing power on my knee. And then I'll touch my knee and I'll say, this is what I would appreciate you working on tonight. And then I thank my body and I wish it a good night and tell it that I love it. And so basically I'm inputting a command into the body to heal itself and focus the healing. And I think it works either separately or in combinations. It might enhance remedies that one takes as well. So that's something I do, and it seems to work for me. I've had a lot of success with it.
You are what you think. I appreciate your calling in with that comment about what you do. You totally are what you think, and we are much more than the sum of our parts, as an organism. And I don't doubt for one second that the interaction between the spirituality of our existence being eternal and the physical body, I think words have great power, and I think what you do is a positive mind garden attitude towards things can have a profound effect that Some people just don't do it, they don't believe it, or some people don't know it, and some people know it and do it.
Well, and also with the neurologically, when you say body, heal my knee, focus on my knee tonight, please, you're making a neural connection from your head to your knee. So it's already directing blood flow, nervous connections, and energy to that area. And so when you say, I feel terrible, you're creating the nerves to say, I feel terrible. So you say, I feel good. Even if you don't feel good, you say, I feel good. You're creating a neurological response to say, I feel good. And those little white lies of saying, I feel good, I will feel good, I am feeling good, all of that is a neurological process. It's not just like what you say in your mind. It's neurological stimulation for those words that your brain interprets. So you are, like you're saying, commanding and programming your head.
Do you guys think that a little pain drives healing? Because I do a lot of athletics and I have lots of small injuries, but I very, very, very rarely use any sort of painkiller, and I'll be fine, and then all of a sudden it'll hurt on that joint. And I imagine that my body is actually doing healing energy, and that pain is not only making me not run on it, but directing healing energy to that.
There's no doubt about it. I'm not saying that you should suppress pain at any instance, because I think it has a positive effect.
It's a natural process
to be in pain, but I think to recognize that when that happens, exactly to get you from stopping doing what you were doing that's causing the pain is obviously the first important thing. But
and it's telling you, it's saying, look, don't forget about me down here. I'm not too happy. So it directs your attention to it, and then you feel the pain because the body's swelling, and that's triggering the nerves. And with the swelling comes in more blood and the white blood cells, and the healing process begins. The healing process is inflammatory, Michael, like you were just saying.
Okay, so let's see here. We're 7:43. Just once again, you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMD Gamble 91.1 FM. From now till 8 o'clock, you're invited to call in with questions, 707-923-3911. Okay, well, I was going to get into the herbs, and we got lots to talk about, so we're going to have to carry this on next month. And that reminds me that for June, we will not be doing the show. We'll be back in July. So anyway, we would probably have to carry this on in July. There's lots of stuff that I'm probably not going to get around to covering. But anyway, let's get straight into I want to talk about horsetail, and there's plenty of other herbs, but I said, unfortunately, we're not going to get into them. But let's start with horsetail. So now, Equiseta marvensi, this is the European horsetail. It's a horsetail that I grew up with all over England, and one, when I was studying herbal medicine, was one that was just absolutely abundant in the hedgerows, especially when it's used as an alchemical preparation. Now, we've talked lots, and I've done several shows with Dr. Pete and mentioned alchemy and spagyric elixirs, and it's really not at all woo-woo. It is completely scientifically based. You could call it quantum medicine. Now, when you make an alchemical preparation of horsetail, the entire constituents are present in the plant. Now, when we make regular tinctures, we cold macerate regular herbs in a menstruum containing a given percentage of ethanol to water, and they're macerated for a certain amount of time, and then according to the alcohol content, the phytochemicals that are solvent at that concentration are maximally extracted and pressed out, and that resulting liquid, you would say, yep, that's phytochemically rich for this particular group of chemicals that are polar solvents, and they could expect to find them in this solution. So now, getting to alchemy, the alchemists split their practice into three distinct processes: the body, soul, and spirit, and most importantly in this discussion, the salt. Now, notably, the water-soluble salts, this is specifically for horsetail. Now, silicic acid, the ortho, meta, di, and trisilicates are present. There's many other components in horsetail, which I'll get to in a minute, but I want to just talk about the salts. In regular tinctures, we don't really extract the salts. The salts are present typically within the cell wall, and these things, may not come out that maximally in a cold maceration. But the alchemists, the first thing that they would do with horsetail as a preparation, which I think rarely happens now because most people will go straight to ethanol and use an ethanol solution at whatever percent they want to get the chemical from the plant. They will use that ethanol, and that is their first process that they use. But the ancient alchemists would ferment the plant. So they would use natural sugars that were occurring in the plant, and they would use naturally occurring yeasts to create a fermentation within that broth. So they would mix the horsetail, they'd probably grind it up in a pestle and mortar after it had been dried, add it to water and let it ferment. Now, during that fermentation process, a small amount of ethanol would be available, and that ethanol, whether it was only 5, 6, or 7%, depending on what yeast or how much sugar there was in the plant, the very first step that they would do is recover what they would term the spirit, the ethanol, and that would be put to one side. So they would distill that, so the whole thing would be put into a distillation apparatus, and the ethanol would be recovered from via condensation. And then the resulting liquid that's left at that point, they would then extract the essential oils from it. So the second step would be the essential oils, notably whatever essential products were in the plant would be recovered again by a distillation process. And then the resulting sludge, if you like, that was left there would be evaporated to remove any liquid component, and then that kind of semi-moist paste sludge would be calcined in an oven. So in a crucible, they would heat an oven up to about 650 or 700 degrees centigrade, about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and they would reduce that sludge, excuse me, to a very fine white powder over about 5 hours at about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This would be resulting, mixture would just be a fine ash and very white. And the whiter it was, the more successful the calcination was. Now, this white ash, now if you had a Soxhlet evaporator and you were able to put this white ash into a thimble, a cellulose thimble, and concurrently wash the ash with distilled water, you would have two separate mixtures within that. In the water-soluble fraction, you would have the water-soluble salts. Now, all of this silicic acid, the orthometa-di and trisilicates, are all water-soluble. So don't get me wrong. When people talk about silica, they kind of automatically think about sand. And they go, well, geez, sand is glass. How can it be water-soluble,
or as a supplement additive that's toxic.
Yeah. So basically, when you've calcined the ashes of horsetail, you get, when you've washed it and repeat washed it, you've washed out all the water-soluble components that will end up in the bottom flask, and all of the caput mortuum, or the death head, the throwaway part of it, the insoluble salts will be retained in the Soxhlet thimble. That you throw away. That they say that has no further part in the work. So just to say that horsetail is one of the first herbs that we're going to cover as a definite calcium metabolite, calcium modulating herb for osteoporosis. It's been used for a long, long time, specifically for joints, tendons, bone repair.
And one thing I want to point out about the horsetail is the one that's safe to use, because horsetail does have some toxic compounds in it. The water horsetail has some toxic compounds in it. So the safe one is the field horsetail. It's not growing right in the river or on the riverbank. It's growing in fields. That's the safer. That's Equisetum arvense. Right. And that's the one that's safe to use as a tea and also as an alchemical preparation.
So as I said, the ancient alchemists, they first fermented the herb to obtain the spirit, whereas in traditional herbal medicine, herbs are steeped in a hydroethanolic menstruum, which becomes the spirit, dissolving the phytochemicals in this most universal solvent. The three main steps in the separation, purification, and cohobation, which is a recombination of these three separated and recombined principles. So this spagyric method of preparing equisetum is unparalleled in its efficacy to replenish bone mineral constituents in the most readily absorbable form. But as we've previously mentioned, nothing occurs in isolation, as neither we exist in isolation. So vitamin D, calcium, magnesium, thyroid, and progesterone are essential components also, as is an organic diet, including meat broths and gelatin-rich broths. I was looking at one particular study of European horsetail's use in the treatment of osteoporosis, and they divided the participants into 4 groups. The first group was a daily diet plus 200 milligrams per kilogram of calcium and vitamin D. The group 3 was a daily diet plus 60 milligrams per kilo of equisetamab NC extract. Group 4 was a daily diet plus 90 milligrams per kilogram equisetamab NC extract, and the last group, group 5, was the daily diet plus 120 milligrams per kilogram body weight of equisetamab NC. The group 1 was just a control group with a regular diet. Now, the use of equisetamab NC is a suitable approach to the treatment of osteoporosis because it contains a significant amount of silica, as we've mentioned, and its consumption leads to the absorption and use of calcium and the formation of collagen. Due to having factors and compounds such as alkaloids, phytosterols, tannin, triterpenoids, and phenolics, equisetamab NC is also effective in preventing bone loss that's caused by age and estrogen poisoning. In addition to silica, equisetamab NC contains secondary metabolites such as quercetin, camphorol, luteolin, apigenin, oleanolic acid, betulinic acid, and ursolic acid, all of which affect the anabolic activity of osteoblasts, encouraging them to build bone. In addition, the silica in this plant results in the formation of bone and connective tissue by facilitating the deposition of calcium and other minerals, decreasing the number of osteoclast cells that break bone down, stimulating the activity of osteoblasts that build, stimulating collagen synthesis, and facilitating the synthesis of glycosaminoglycan and collagen, which are very much part of the bone matrix. So, according to the research, the components, ursolic acid, 32%, oleanolic acid, 10%, and also betulinic acid at 3.6%. These are particularly implicated in driving osteoblastosis. And so European horsetail long used as a bone remedy, and I would say that an alchemical preparation would have superior effects over a tincture. There are other things that you can do, I think, to maximize the use of it, but just to say that this is an herb that's been used for a long, long time, and even without it being a spagyric preparation, it's used quite successfully, I think, in Europe.
Even as a decoction, you can boil it to get more of the minerals out.
It would have to be decocted, so you have to have a rolling boil with a covered lid for 30 or 40 minutes and extract the water-soluble silicates that are in it. Okay, so
I always notice when I use horsetail that my nails start growing at a much more rapid rate. So I imagine that's happening in your bones as well at the same time.
Okay, I wanted to move on to, I mentioned it last month, cascara. Now, we've done lots of different shows with Dr. Pete on cascara being a major anti-inflammatory, specifically for the bowel, for promoting bowel movements and resolving chronic constipation. But not only that, if you look on either the NIH library or PubMed or other, ResearchGate or other kind of quote unquote sites that have peer-reviewed data concerning experiments, etc., that are run, the genus Rhamnus, which is one of the species, one of the genera is Cascara. Amodin is the main compound that they are saying now increases bone mineral density and increases the bone microarchitecture. So it's part and parcel due to an anti-inflammatory response, and also part and parcel, and again, we have to carry this over in July, the whole lipopolysaccharide discourses that we've had with Dr. Pete are mitigated by Amodin. And it's the fact that lipopolysaccharide enters the bloodstream and wreaks havoc systemically in the body, and it is a pro-inflammatory substance that is then implicated in osteoporosis and bone dissolution. So another good reason then to use the herb, even if you're just using it for constipation, is that it will have a side effect of decreasing lipopolysaccharide formation, because this lipopolysaccharide is a intestinal it makes the intestinal barrier permeable to macromolecules. So typically when you eat your food, you break these down into very small components, and not that we would sit here and believe in shuttles and transport proteins per se, because Dr. Pete was always very skeptical about that kind of elucidation of physiology, but that's very small components in our food are shuttled across the intestinal wall and get into the blood supply where they are used and are useful. But lipopolysaccharide has the effect of damaging the intestinal membrane, so make larger holes there in the intestine so that macromolecules can freely pass over. Now, this is some part due to the rise in inflammation and asthma and other inflammatory processes, that these macromolecules that would never normally get into the bloodstream are there promoting and provoking these inflammatory responses.
And encouraging a lot of different food intolerances and food allergies.
So, again, I got so much I'd like to say with Cascare, but we are 3 minutes to the top of the hour. So let me just give you the last part. So essentially then, the Cascara molecule contains the very red pigment, which Dr. Pete was always very keen on these, and we've mentioned it many times with different products like Uncaria, which is cat's claw, which is a dark red pigment in it.
And then the St. John's wort is a dark red pigment. Those dark red pigments are actually very, very anti-inflammatory.
With a free radical quenching compound. So that's how they have the anti-inflammatory effect. They have that ability to soak up this radical formation that happens.
And the other thing too with Cascara, since you have mentioned it, is I just want to let our listeners know that the dose is very specific to your physiology. Some people need 5 drops, some people need 5 milliliters, which is a lot more. So it's very dose specific for your physiology, and it's something people need to experiment. And it's not just for constipation; it's anti-inflammatory, and you can use a dose that is not giving you a cramping, colicky pains.
Okay, so in July, not June, but in July, we're going to carry on this. We've got quite a bit to get through here. So there's going to be discussion on astragalus, the anti-inflammatory effects and the bone-building anti-osteoporotic effects of astragalus. We're going to go through Salvia militarizer, known as Dan Shen. We're going to cover the panaxes and the research behind the ginsenosides to support all of their use, naringin and its use. And we're going to go through Sophora japonica, Salvia, and some of the labiates. And those will be rounding up the osteoporosis basics herbs. So you've been listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMBD Garberville 91.1 FM. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah.
And we can be reached at westernbotanicalmedicine.com. We have a Twitter account and we have a YouTube channel. Alternatively, we can be reached toll-free on our toll-free number 1-888-WBM-HERB. And until July, have an awesome solstice, and we'll see you then.
Thank you for listening.
All right. We are coming in, and we are adjusting some microphones.